Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. On the last episode, Gelon turned down the opportunity to do a large battle with the Sequani, falling back and causing the Sequani to immediately advance on the undefended province of Gelon, which also was undergoing a slave uprising, as you can see here. So the garrison army of Gelon had to face yet another battle against an invading Sequani force. Luckily, as before, we were able to use formational advantages to overcome the fact that the enemy were technically more powerful, and we routed them off the field. Eusebius and the Daemons returned back from Noria to counter the fact that Deorsi had sent an army to stand at our border, highly suspicious, but now we have the Daemons to defend against any funny business. The Celtic Confederation sent a small fleet to attack the Sequani raiding party just outside Massalia. This was a chance for Homer to come in with his fleet and destroy these pirates. There was a messy battle with casualties on both sides and lots of spontaneous combustion, but in the end our superior numbers and superior positioning allowed us to crush the Sequani navy. Now let's continue. Homer was in the majority bloc of the council, a group that was broadly in favour of using the new wealth flowing in from their new territories to increase the power and influence of the city on the world stage. Those who favoured the Timucoi's plan to reinvest it in developing a widespread Massalian republic were usually not given much traction in debates, instead pushing their views through a network of agents furnished by Melanthios. The man himself was now rarely seen in public, although his presence in the city was indicated by sudden, unexplained decreases in the council's share of tax revenue. So we're currently on the battle results of that naval engagement with the Sequani fleet. The Celtiberian Confederation did pretty well. We took the majority of the losses, 3 boats lost a couple of crews down to minimal strength, but actually the majority of our fleet is okay. The Sequani fleet is wiped out, but for a few survivors who sail off towards Genua, but then the Celtiberians chase them down with their own survivors to destroy them. So that's the end of that fleet. Peace once again for the Massalian trade ships in this area. As we move on, the Sistani yet again offer military access for whatever reason. They want to be able to move through my territory, and there's nothing I can really gain by moving through theirs, so this is a very one-sided offer. It's not the first time they've asked, and it probably won't be the last. I was only going to accept it if they could make it worth my while in some way, but they weren't prepared to pay for it, so I'm going to turn them down, especially because they are devious in terms of their integrity, which means it's likely they're intending to use that military access for suspicious purposes.
You are wise enough.
Now Rhodos comes at me offering a defensive alliance, another interesting offer. Neither side really gains from this. All it does is cement our good relations, because it's very unlikely that we can help each other in the event of an attack on our territories. They weren't prepared to pay for the protection of the Massalian state, but I decided I was going to accept their offer just to give myself a nice ally, because at the moment I'm quite politically isolated. Lots of people are neutral or slightly friendly towards me, but I have no real friends, so Rhodos is going to come into my inner circle. Now the slave army in Gelon decides to move into Sequani territory in order to attack Gelon. It seems that they've decided he is a ripe target, and according to the balance bar, they are correct. Their army is quite powerful. It suffered attrition recently, so it's not at full strength, but it has some good units with lots of level ups as well, so their stats are unusually high, and Gelon's mashup of various different kinds of units isn't going to be able to provide a particularly powerful front against their infantry charge, so perhaps they have a chance, although you can see that I formed up in a very advantageous position on top of a massive hill where my siege weaponry is going to give the enemy a big pounding as they come slowly up towards me. I've also got various traps set up. I've got archers in front of the line ready to pepper the enemy. I've got these tar pits, though they're not so useful because the rain means I can't use my fire arrows to ignite them. So the enemy's army is at the bottom of the hill and now must advance up it towards me. On the enemy's side though is this forest. Most of their army will be able to come through in hiding, meaning my long-range artillery isn't going to be as effective as it would be otherwise, and even if it can see the enemy whilst they're in the forest, the trees may stop the shots. So they've got that on their side, but I too am going to be using the forest to my advantage. I've got my most elite units, all of these cavalry and 2 squads of heavy swordsmen, off on this side, hidden in the forest to attack the enemy's flank once they come to engage my relatively light front line. So hopefully I can hold them in place and then smash them up with a cavalry charge and a heavy infantry attack on the flank. As the enemy advanced, they actually became completely hidden in the forest there, and I sort of lost track of where they were, but I was sure they were about to emerge at any second, so I sent units forward to light the brimstone pit. So this was actually too early. It's still going to be a couple of minutes before they actually arrive at the pits, but luckily the pits will still be burning by the time they arrive, the first of them just appearing here. A little bit later, the enemy are closer, just about to come over the pits. Now the enemy could skirmish with me and thus wait for them to go out, but all of their skirmishers are actually javelin men, meaning they need to advance to close range before the skirmish phase of the battle can begin. This both means I can pepper them with arrows as they come in, and it means they're going to walk over the pits. And in a strange, nonsensical sight, some of the men will apparently choose to step into the fire and be killed by it. It really doesn't make sense, the animations for these brimstone pits, but at least we killed a couple of enemies. Now once the enemy do close the skirmish range, they actually have a big skirmish advantage, so I immediately fall back with my archers. They're going to get out of the way, causing the enemy to have to move even further forwards, and as they do, I'm going to push my fireballs down. Hopefully we can do some good damage. The slope of the hill means they go almost entirely towards the enemy's right flank, but once it hits, it does massive damage to their frontline regiment. I actually would have wished it would have gone straight forward because they had 3 lines in their centre, so it would have done extra damage to attack the centre, but still, we did a lot of damage to these flanking regiments. One regiment there almost completely routs. One of those fireballs very late to come down, unfortunately doesn't kill anyone because there are so many enemies killed already, it wasn't able to hit anyone. The unit that was on the verge of routing actually does rout at this point, so we've managed to weaken their line substantially. We're also throwing javelins at the moment. We have these spearmen who can throw javelins, and the enemy are standing in range as they skirmish further down the line. Eventually they decide that's a bad idea to just stand there, so they're going to move their main line forward. So the main attack begins. It's actually already begun on my right flank, where they're attacking these medium spears. They have a good chance of actually getting through them here, especially if they deploy their heavy swords. In the centre, my guys are skirmishing them, throwing their javelins, and I realise it's really a good time for me to charge. I have a huge hill advantage. Let's just try and push the enemy off the map. A nice spot for a battle, eh? I've had my eye on it for a while. Started looking around when Melanthios' little lurkers started telling me the slaves were going to try and kill me. Apparently I am so hated by the oppressed people of Rhaetia that if they kill me it will cause another uprising, engulfing everything in a mess of anarchy. So that's their plan. It all falls flat, of course, if they find that they can't kill me, which, by the looks of it, seems to be their problem. In fact, the situation suggests it might be me who kills them. A funny old world. Alright, you lazy bastards, spears up, sound the advance. Our front line charges down the hill, ramming into the enemy units, and not really doing anything in particular because charge bonuses don't have much effect in these game mechanics. But anyway, we catch the unit in melee. We don't quite get to their skirmishers, but we've got them fighting at a disadvantage, fighting uphill against us. We've even managed to outflank them here on our left, where the defeated enemy units are missing, so that's going to go well in our favour. The enemy general was coming up on an extreme right flank formation, but he's going to be met by our hidden swordsman appearing from the forest, so his attempt to flank us is not going to be very successful. Gelon's running forward to inspire the men. You can see the battle line is really disorderly. There's lots of different tiers of battle line as our men charge down and then actually got outflanked by the enemy. So the charging strategy wasn't all that useful. However, the enemy are starting to break, so it doesn't really matter that we're getting a little bit outflanked. You can see there's this huge group of enemy skirmishers, some of whom are still damaging us. We need to get rid of them soon. The enemy's general has been caught in combat by my swordsman. One unit is locking him in position, the other unit I put at the side to throw javelins into the flank of this enemy unit, hoping that a storm of javelins from uphill would wipe out so many men that this enemy general's unit would just rout, and that would disinspire the rest of the army. As you can see, my men are just standing there for the most part. My cavalry are going to deal with those skirmishers. Eventually, once they do throw, they pretty much all throw their javelins at the same guy and actually hit the allied troop next to him. So it was a pretty much useless use of their javelins. Very unfortunate. I think they weren't quite close enough. Anyway, my cavalry are driving enemy units off the field. Some enemy units routing are ignored so they can come back and attack the enemy skirmishers to stop them attacking us. Luckily, the brimstone pits have now gone out so we can charge right through, hitting the back of the enemy's units. Charging uphill, meaning the damage won't be all that much, but it's enough to really destroy their morale. Gelon too has charged forwards with his own cavalry to get involved in this combat, so now the majority of the enemy's front line is beginning to break. We're crushing them, hitting them in the back with cavalry wherever we can, especially where it's swordsmen, so we can charge in without fear of being defeated in a prolonged engagement. And these army losses are going to be spooking the rest of the enemy's army. You can see the slaves are starting to fall back, even where they had the advantage here on my right flank. So very soon it's a decisive victory, the enemy's general being the last unit to rout, but eventually going as they saw the rest of their army fleeing the field. So the ambitions of these slaves have now been crushed. We haven't defeated the whole army, but we've killed enough of them that there's pretty much no chance of their uprising succeeding. So let's head back to the campaign map and have a little look at the battle results. The numbers look very good for Gelon, 150 or so lost, the enemy losing thousands of troops. Some survivors rush into the mountains and start taking attrition. We'll be able to hunt them down soon, or perhaps we won't, we'll see in a second. So moving into the next turn, I have a war target available. I can tell the forces of Rhodos to come and help me if I want, though I don't think that's going to be very helpful. Here are the survivors of the slaves. It's 6 regiments, all at low strength. Nearby is Cretheus with the council task force, who also has a similar force at full strength, although the units themselves are much worse. The question was whether Gelon was going to hunt down the slaves or not, essentially, and I decided I wouldn't actually bother chasing them down, because I'm going to take this opportunity to lay siege to the Sequani's capital city here. The enemy army inside is much more powerful than mine, but they only have 1 turn of food, so I'm going to siege them out, force a field battle where there's a much greater chance of success. The question now was, should Cretheus hunt down the slaves? His forces could be able to defeat them, but I was not 100% sure actually that they would, because they're all low-level Gallic levied troops, and Cretheus isn't an experienced commander, and the enemy has very high-level, heavy troops. So I thought even my numeric advantage might actually mean the battle has lots of casualties. So I thought I'll just leave the enemy to stand there and take attrition, but just in case they do go towards Octojuron, which they might, I'm going to have Cretheus set up an ambush on the road. So then if we do fight, then we can use the ambushing advantage to overcome the fact that the enemy's troops are superior to ours, or at least that's the plan. Now for Eusebius and the Daemons, the DRC threat on the border seems to have disappeared. We can no longer see anyone standing there looking like they might be tempted to invade. And actually there are forces of neighbouring parties to the east who potentially could come in and attack Batavian or Nerea via the various roads. So the Daemons are going to move to a strategic crossroads, and I'm going to leave them here to defend this position, basically a reactionary force against any enemy movements. I'm also going to finally upgrade those swordsmen by popular demand, so we now have the modern swordsman with javelins. So Eusebius will stay there in patrol mode to increase the public order in that region. Now you might remember I tried to get some guys to join the Timucoi in earlier episodes, and as people rightly told me, you can't do it via marriage, I have to do bribes or adoption. So in this case I used a bribe, and indeed it brings Cretheus onto the Timucoi. Unfortunately it destroys their gravitas because they've publicly accepted a bribe, but we'll build them up soon enough. You can also see, lucky guy, he's got a domestic goddess for a wife, which is giving him some nice bonuses, so good for him. So now we've got 1 more member on the Timucoi. However, we don't actually have any influence whatsoever, especially because Cretheus has no influence. His credibility has been destroyed by openly joining the Timucoi, so we still don't get any bonuses for having our party faction control a lot of influence. So as expected, the Sequani sally out to fight Gelon. The balance bar still really far in their favour, even without their defences aiding them, so it seemed like this is going to be a difficult battle, but I was gambling that the balance bar is wrong, because it's been wrong about the balance of power many times before, so I'm hoping that I can take the risk on doing this unnecessary field battle, because if I win, I might be able to crush the Sequani and take this settlement. The battlefield we're fighting on is really flat, so I can't take any form of terrain advantage, but neither can the enemy. You can see I'm moving my cavalry out to an extreme right position as my main force just stands in the open. I've got my big line of mostly medium and lighter spears, actually, with some heavy spears right in the middle who are going to be defending my centre. Skirmishers in front of them, and I've got my heavy swords and the lightest of my javelins on the left flank. They're going to be able to do some manoeuvres. I basically intend to send them out to do a wide flanking manoeuvre once the enemy gets a bit closer. As they approach, they're going to be bombarded by my ballistas and my scorpions, so we'll be able to do a bit of damage to them before they arrive. The enemy army is advancing in a quite orderly formation, lots of spears and swordsmen in this army, with a second line of skirmishers. The fact they had the skirmishers in the second line suggested to me that they intended to attack without a skirmish phase. You can also see that on both flanks they've got reserves of spears protecting the back of their army, which is quite good for them. That's going to damage the potential of my flanking attacks, both for my cavalry on the right and my swords on the left. As the enemy come in, I'm hitting them with my siege weapons, although they tend to miss the vast majority of the time. Occasionally we get a few hits and kill a few handfuls of enemy soldiers, but actually the siege weapons aren't particularly powerful. In general, they'll get fewer than 100 kills in each battle I've found. So the enemy are now beginning an advance. They decide they're not going to take my missile fire. They're going to rush through the range of my siege weapons in order to get closer. My archers in front will be able to start firing at them soon, and the enemy don't look like they're going to bring forward their skirmishers to destroy my archers first. So it looks like I'm going to get some free shots off on them. It's an honor to finally meet the young master himself. Come and sit. There's much to discuss. Well, actually, I rather thought I would go. No, there's something I wanted to give you. You're a man now, and a man needs certain resources that I can help you acquire. For example, perhaps you might have need of this. That. How much is that? Oh, merely a few hundred talents. A present. A welcoming gift. A welcoming gift? I see. So you asked me to decide now. Well, It wasn't really intended as a choice, young Cretheus. Curiously, the enemy then did decide to stop and use their skirmishers from behind their main line, so a deceptive formation. It does mean their skirmishers aren't being used as effectively as they could have been, because now I'm free to fire at their main line at closer range with my archers. They did though decide to attack my swordsmen on the flank with a single unit of their own spears, although that unit is now being singled out for attacks by my javelinmen, causing them to take heavy casualties as they come in. Once they actually engage with my men doing their characteristically unenthusiastic fighting, they're going to be even more in danger of being hit by the javelins if they're not moving. My guys will just destroy them there. I've decided to rush forward my front line because I don't want this skirmish to continue. The enemy are going to win. They have loads of skirmishers versus my couple of archers who aren't doing very well. So we're going to close the gap. The enemy decides to advance to meet me, so we're going to fight in between our original positions of the main lines. The chargers meet. The enemy have a lot of low quality infantry and a lot of high quality infantry, whereas mine are mostly somewhere in the middle. So it's going to be an interesting mix in terms of which parts of the fight are actually going to go in my favour if I leave them be. The enemy's initial attack with those spearmen is now pretty much defeated. They've lost enough men that they're about to rout from all of those javelins coming down. I do need to take care of those enemy skirmishers though, because they've been left behind and can keep firing at my skirmishers. Luckily my cavalry are now in position. I begin a cavalry attack on the rearmost of the enemy skirmishers. I actually had some spearmen who were chasing them as well, but they're going to turn round and head back to attack some spearmen who are behind them. These enemy spearmen here, who are not going to enjoy being attacked from two sides by my forces. So now both of the flanks of the battle are actually going okay. The centre's the big problematic area because the enemy's heavy swordsmen are battering against my medium spears, and these guys will lose if the enemy's heavy swords get their way, especially because the enemy have a numerical superiority even on top of their man-for-man advantage. So that middle section is a bit dodgy. I really need these cavalry actually to come and rear charge them, but they're having too much fun destroying the enemy's slingers. Also, to the enemy's advantage, their reinforcements have just arrived. Really, they should have waited before they attacked for these reinforcements to arrive, but alas. They're going to attack us with longbowmen and slingers to begin with. I'm trying to fire back with my artillery, but not doing much. And they have a couple of units of infantry who'll come to join the battle. I need to clear up the situation in the centre so I can prepare to receive them before they arrive. The situation on the left flank is okay. I've got my heavy swordsmen fighting with the enemy's heavy spears. I'm hoping that my men will win in a prolonged engagement. Plus we have the enemy quite surrounded and javelins moving in to support. In the centre, I finally use my cavalry to rush in and attack the enemy's heavy swords, and actually at that very moment they rout. They had been taking casualties because I was focusing my archer fire on them, and this attack by cavalry just really tips the balance. They decide to run, and this guy in particular decides to showboat taking out the enemy. So the centre has been cleared up just in time to receive the enemy's attack, and at the same time my right flank starts to clear up as well. This unit of heavy spears, which is fighting with my hoplites, a vastly superior spear unit, decides it's not worth continuing this fight and starts to move away, especially because it's being attacked in the rear by my spearmen as well. So All of my troops are now ready to receive the enemy's attack. My cavalry go around the enemy to attack their reinforcements. We're going to wipe these longbowmen off the field because they're actually really good, even better than the enemy's initial presentation of skirmishers. So with them lost, the enemy are actually losing a massive portion of their strength, and the enemy do nothing to really stop me from doing this. So the balance bar is now shifting very much in our favour. Just a few enemy infantry units who have come in and got caught up in my own spears left to be defeated, but it shouldn't be too long before they realise this battle is lost. And there you go, they don't fight on for very long, meaning the battle ends in a heroic victory for Gelon's forces. Yet again, the odds of the balance bar have been overcome by Gelon and the heralds of Massalia. So this means we are now guaranteed to take the settlement because they've been starved out. That means it doesn't really matter what the battle results are, but let's have a look anyway. It's a heroic victory for Gelon, losing just a couple of hundred men, defeating a couple of thousand. The enemy heavily depleted. I execute the survivors, meaning there'll be almost no one left alive in Vesontio as we capture it, as the end turn sequence finishes. I decided I might actually not just occupy it. I think Gelon is probably out for a little bit of pillage and plunder. I decided I would loot Vesontio as I come in, giving me a massive cash bonus and damaging all of the buildings, but still allowing me to occupy the settlement. We also have a new festival starting, the Oracle at Delphi. This gives me a year of increased wealth and increased public order. Quite useful. So Vesontio itself now has lots of heavily damaged barbarian buildings, but actually is still quite economically valuable. A couple of them I'll probably repair so I can make more money off it. The others I'll probably destroy at some point and build up from scratch. Now the Sequani still have forces in the province and one more settlement of their own, but it's significantly weaker, so this capture will have very much destroyed their ability to harass us. Now I was wondering where the other province in Germania Minor is, the hilariously named Bagacum. I couldn't see it anywhere. It turns out it's actually to the north, so if I want to capture that settlement and unite Germania Minor, I'm going to have to go quite far out of my way, so I'm probably not going to bother. Another consequence of this capture is that I can now see the full extent of the Boii kingdom. It goes all the way through Germania, surrounding the Sequani territory. They're even more powerful than I thought they were. Interesting to know. As for the Sequani, I thought I might be able to make them a client state after my recent victories, but they're still not willing to accept that. They do want peace, but I'm not going to go in for peace without any sort of advantage to me. I couldn't get trade, I couldn't get money, so in the end I decided I will just let them sweat it out for now and perhaps try and get a more favourable peace deal later on. Another diplomatic priority is to improve our relationship with the Boii. I wanted to get non-aggression or trade. They wouldn't accept either, which is definitely a bad sign. A powerful and non-cooperative kingdom along a long stretch of our border. We'll see how that goes next time. While the Massalians have been unifying the Alpine territories, other enterprising powers have been doing the same on their borders. To the west, the Celtiberian and Gallic confederations ruled lands twice as large as Massalia, while in the east the kingdom of Boii stretched through Central and Eastern Europe, impossible to ignore. To the south, the Illyrian kingdoms, slowly cooling the ashes of the Roman Republic, were starting to see Cisalpina as the next logical step in their expansion. For all the security Massalia had won, the wealth that came with it made them a tempting target for their culturally mismatched neighbours.